The mean, or the average, depending on how you want to call it, can easily be calculated with a simple formula. It is the total divided by the number of records. Let's start with creating a function, find average, and pass in the data sample to the function. So I'm going to first clear our workspace and create a file. I'm going to import everything that we've done up to now. I'm going to comment out the print statements. We're going to reuse our functions from before. We're going to be using the total to be the result of calculating the sum. Then we also have the size, which equals number of records of data sample. Average equals total divided by size. And then we return the average. We're going to pass in our data from CSV into this find average function, and then we're going to print out the results. To avoid using the square brackets, let's add a second argument to the function. It'll take a Boolean value to indicate whether the data sample has headers. The default is false, which makes it an optional argument. But if it's true, it means we want to skip the first row. Another thing that we can do is to return a nicely formatted average with just up to 2 decimal points. So we can do that with the string formatting function, and we pass in the settings for 2 decimal points. We have a typo. And there's our answer. I'm going to comment out this line. Just a quick note here about types. Calculating the average number requires division, and division can only be done for number types, not characters, not booleans, nor strings. When you divide a float by an integer, Python will accept this, but keep in mind that it returns a float. So if you want to end up with an integer type, you'll have to convert it afterwards. One really quick way to check the types for your variables is to use the built-in type function. So let's look at the types of a couple of values that we've created so far. So in our first one, we have the average price, which is a float. Our data from CSV is a list, and our my CSV read in data using the NumPy's generate from text function, so that's a NumPy array. Now, it's a handy trick to use this type for when you want to figure out why your calculations might be off. If we were to convert the average price into an integer, you'll see that it will show a number that's rounded down. So you can see the first number has the decimals, and then when you use integer, it converts it. So definitely check your types if you feel that your calculations might be a bit off. Let's look at one more example for calculating the average. Let's try dividing our data sample in half. So let's calculate a midpoint value and say our ties are just divided squarely in the middle using the midpoint value. We have number of ties from our other file, so we're using that number and dividing it by 2. And then we round the midpoint value just to make sure it's an integer. Python lists require you to enter an integer value to represent the index. We're going to use a string here and print out the inputted values of our first half of the average is 0 to midpoint. We want to say that the data sample does have a header, so we're going to have a true there. Then we're going to copy that, and the second half is from the midpoint to the end. And there is no header. That's the average of the two halves. We can also make sure that our output is formatted to just 2 decimal points. There they are. And further add symbols and such to make it more readable.